One of the interesting things that I thought came out of some discussions around these issues in the US was that some of the productivity gains, or in fact almost half the productivity gains arising from some of these technologies, was in fact more efficient use of inputs. And I guess from the perspective of an input supplier or an advisor with an input supplier in the background, that may not be always that welcome. I wonder, have you thought through that in fact digital technologies and some of these things might in fact be a way for farmers to considerably refine their use of inputs rather than necessarily accept their agronomists or their standard approach in terms of what they apply? Is that an issue in the industry that is talked about?
I'll crack at that one. Does this work? Can you hear me? Look, we're in this industry for the long haul, and we're all about long-term relationships with people, Mick. And if someone might put less inputs on that particular crop at this particular time to get a bigger return, but they might then give them the opportunity to put more resources somewhere else in the farm business, or be able to use it in another way. So, for us anyway, it doesn't really enter our thinking that it could potentially reduce inputs overall. It's more about the end game over the long period of time. So I put that graph up there about resource use efficiency. It's a really important aspect of it.
And just on that point, one of the things that's often talked about in our space is, around the competitiveness of Australian farmers. So Australian farmers are very good at what they do generally, but we're now, based on the technologies we have, we're in a global market, and more often than not, we live and die by global trends, and particular pricing and those sorts of things. So one of the things that's evident in the long term is that one of the things we can do is manage the cost of our inputs to produce more, if not doing things smarter, doing things better, so we're using less and gaining efficiencies with the products that we're producing so that we can compete better in a global market. And it's going to become tougher. You look at the Eastern Bloc's countries and those sorts of things coming online with the amount of ground that they've got over there and the yields that they're now starting to produce. Some of our staple exports are going to come under pressure. So I agree with what Tim's saying. It's a long-term approach. This is not about inputs going down next year. This is a long-term strategy.
Yeah, and I think you're both spot on. We need the holistic approach for how we handle this, and the key to it is still putting ourselves back in the grower's shoes. And if it makes sense, well, then that's the right answer. And the weed is a good example. Now we're only applying product to 5 to 30% of the field or the paddock. What does that mean? Well, we can actually start changing some of the product types that we've been using, but also the grower behaviour has been such is that they're actually more inclined to go spraying more frequently, and as a result, save more moisture, and then they can turn that moisture into kilograms of grain, which has been a benefit.
There's a question in the middle.
Hi, it's Cathy Evans from Tassie again. I've got a question perhaps directed to Phil around the notion of adoption and the trusted advisor. I'm just wondering if, so that's a one-on-one relationship, and if we go back to the history of extension, there's been a lot of group processes, farming system groups and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if this new world suggests a new model of extension around this. So, one-on-one's really good, but should we also be thinking about perhaps institutes for private good, where we have, communities of practice around this to build people, so when people open the box and get the technology out, that they can be supporting each other in, well, I use this bit and then you use that bit, and how do we do that? I'm just wondering if there's any thought then around using the community to help the adoption side of this.
No, thanks for that. And I should have briefed you beforehand. Only easy questions, if you could, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting, but I think what I was referring to there is that having been an agronomist, I haven't walked paddocks for 15 years or so. There is a very strong bond, a very strong relationship between advisors and their farmers, and it goes beyond just giving tech advice. I think that's what I was referring to there about the trusted advisor, that technology can't necessarily replace that type of relationship. But I agree with what you're saying. There's the upskilling of the individual agronomist, but then there's the networking aspect that is required. And AgLink, as an organisation, we conduct agronomy forums for our people to come in northern cropping, southern cropping, horticulture, all those things. And in surveying those guys as to what do you need, what do you need out of these types of meetings, they all say networking. We want to talk to other people about what they're doing. So there's a bit of a propensity to get bound up in your own backyard, and information coming in and out can sometimes be restricted. So I agree. As far as extension goes in Australian ag, we probably suck at it a bit. We've lost all of our Department of Primary Industries. The basics of extension that we used to have, and more businesses like ours take up the responsibility of extension. And I think there's technologies there that we need to utilise more on the extension side, and perhaps social media and those sorts of things is more of that.
I'll chip in if I can there and say that I reckon we do a pretty good job of group learning in the environment. And one of the photos I put up was of a farmer meeting that we held, and there was 100 advisors there, and we get some trusted advisors, very specialists in their field, to come and present at that. And then you might go and have a one-on-one conversation later on about what that so-and-so said, or I've read this at the latest GRDC update. How do I apply that to my business? One-on-one stuff there. But collaborative learning as a group happens day in, day out. And as much as we all hold farmer meetings and get people together, and it's as much a social function as a technology function, we all get together and talk about it and kick the clods and go to the cloud and the tablet and have a beer and have a think about what's on offer out there and how we're going to adopt it in our own business. So I think we do a pretty good job of extension. Phil, I think the public extension people might be gone, but it's been replaced by industry pretty well.
There's a question in the front.
Thanks, Mick. Just following on that line of thinking, Tim, it seems to me that you've invested fairly substantially in this network of automatic weather stations and probes, and not only have we got private companies providing extension services, but you look to be making a fairly substantial investment in collecting data, which used to be done by the public organisations. Would you like to comment on that? Well,
that's right. We have invested a fair bit because we haven't got time to hang around and wait. We want this stuff today. We want to use it today to make decisions, better informed decisions today. So, yes, we made a decision to go down that path because we see that as an opportunity, a service that's demanded in the marketplace. So there's a hole there, so we're filling that hole. And I think you'll see more of that happen over time. And growers, if they can get value out of it, they can see, I can get value out of doing that or using that piece of technology. Well, that's what's going to be the proof. That'll be the proof in the pudding, if you like. That'll be whether we made the right decision or not, but I think we're on the right track.
I guess a related question that comes from that earlier discussion about extension is the extent to which there's a feed into the private systems from the public research agencies. So obviously the GRDC does a lot of work in that space, but I'd argue that our universities, for example, don't have as much connection with the private sector advisory network as they perhaps previously did with the public sector advisory network. Do you think there's a gap there that we're going to get into trouble over, or do you think that the private side of it is information seeking enough to be able to bridge that gap between the researchers and the advice on the ground?
Yeah, and look, when I say we suck at extension, I think that's what I am referring to, is that I think Ros alluded to the amount of money and energy that we spend from our government resources on the chasing data side as opposed to extending the data. And I know, look, GRDC have made moves recently with the National Agribusiness Group, where we get together and we talk about extension and projects and opportunities. Certainly, as our group, and I imagine all of the guys here, we're more heavily involved with the universities now with regards to their programs, etc. But it has been an issue in the past. There's been a lot of money spent on projects that never made it out of the top drawer into commercial reality. And I'm sorry if anyone was involved in the carbon farming initiative, but that was a classic. Spent a lot of money on projects that will never ever see the light of day. and that's part of the issue. But I think it could be better going forward, but certainly most businesses now are interacting more heavily with the researchers, I think, one-on-one.
Does that, Tim, you're in an interesting spot in having clients involved in livestock as well. Do you think that gap or potential gap is also there? I mean, most farmers probably don't have livestock advisors per se, although the use of vets is certainly increasing. Do you think that is a gap on the livestock side of things? Or
Yes, there is a gap there for sure. The research, you talked about the universities sort of maybe falling down. I think maybe they have just dropped the ball for a bit, and potentially they may catch up in the medium term, but they need to do a bit of work to catch up. But for livestock people, yes, the specialist livestock advice, it is a growing sector of the advice industry, if you like. And we all know that in our part of the world, sheep are woolly and cattle are hairy, but we do get down to a more serious level than that. But it is a bit of a gap, but I think it is being fulfilled by a growing sector.
Okay. How are we going for questions? No one else? There's one right at the front. Angus.
This one's for you, Bards.
My name's Alex McBratney from the
Alex.
University of Sydney. Yes. I just wanted to talk a bit about this extension and advice. And I actually believe that Australia leads the world in industry advice. In other words, we're well ahead of Europe, well ahead of the US. I think when it comes to this extension advice thing, we might have, in Australia, have conflated the words a little bit, because extension is not the same as advice, and extension really was about extending very expensive experimentation across the landscape, which is not the same as doing advice. But I think we conflated the two, and then the Departments of Agriculture were doing extension and advice, and then eventually just doing advice and not extension. So I think that's kind of, whereas in the US, they still have university-based extension. In other words, they carry out experiments across the landscape. Everywhere they try to extend the knowledge. So how in the commercial sector can you extend rather expensive experimentation in practice? I guess that's the question. If we no longer have extension in the true sense, which we don't, how can we do it in a commercial way? I worked in precision ag. We always thought the greatest thing about precision ag was every farmer, every grower can do their own experiments because they have the equipment of variable rate and yield monitoring to do their own experiments. But that doesn't seem to have taken off as a kind of idea. But anyway, I'd like to hear your comments. Thanks.
Oh, he's talking to you, Bart.
Oh, right, okay. It's a really good question. So, and to me, there's two parts of it. There's the extension, but then there's also the adoption, right? So, and I think we're at a stage where we do have a lot of information available to us, and it's how we best disseminate it and actually get it out to the marketplace, and people can adopt some of these new technologies and ideas. So that's part of the challenge as well, which is something that we're working on. And to me, a good product or a good program or whatever it happens to be, and I think we need to start talking or thinking more as a program type approach rather than just a product type approach. We'll basically do three things that'll either, or one or more of three things. And for us, it's going to save me time, it's going to make me money, or it'll give me peace of mind. Right? So if we can hit sort of one or more of those ideas, well then it then becomes to us a bit of a show and tell exercise. We use our field R&D people to get those ideas out. We work with some early adopters, such as our key channel partners, and then we rely on them, our advisors, to then go and talk to their 25 or 30 growers each that they've got available to them.
Yeah, thanks, Bards. Yeah, I think one of the things around new technologies coming out and that I get a lot in my particular role is people making an appointment, want to come and see, I've got a new technology. And we talk through what it is, what it does. I think this might be helpful for you. I think this might work for you. Whereas if you turn it round on its head and you have earlier collaboration between the technology developers and the agribusiness people as to what problems do you have, right? How can we solve that problem and then bring that understanding into the market? And I think that's probably, because things are happening so fast at the moment, there's a lot of stuff coming through that this might be useful for you. This might be something that you can use. And so you go through this whole phase of trying to understand, will it be useful, will it not be useful, can I make money out of it? And that's sort of the dilemma we're in at the moment. And I think if we can turn those conversations around and get that early collaboration going, it will help a lot more.
I can give an example of a recent change in farming practice, if you like, across the broadacre farming in our part of the world, and that's all about timer sowing. And it arose out of a national GRDC project around water use efficiency. And it was very collaborative. I mean, we took busloads of people to the farm sites. You know, so farm sites were set up across the region where growers could go and look at it happening as it was happening. And that collaborative process with the CSIRO researchers and the research team was really beneficial, and it resulted in quickly showing that you can capture more water, store more water, and then use more water through stubble measurement and timer sowing. And the adoption of that practice across the cropping belt happened really quickly and has made a big difference to the bottom line of growers. And that happened is it an extension process? Is it an advisory process? I don't know, I don't really care. It worked really well because it was being extended by those people. Then you could look at it as a group of people and go away and do some paddocks and then get your group of farmers together, look at those paddocks, and as I said, it's been really widely adopted and very effective.